Welcome to episode 2 of the FWD Baseball Podcast. I'm Alex.
I'm Steve.
I'm Ray.
And today we're going to be talking about the American League and National League Championship Series, and we'll preview the 2020 World Series between the Tampa Bay Rays and the Los Angeles Dodgers.
Without further ado, let's play ball.
All right, today we'll be talking about the American League Championship Series, the National League Championship Series. We'll give you our preview and predictions for the World Series. Why don't we get right started with the American League Championship Series? Steve, tell us about that great ALCS that we just watched.
Of course, thank you very much, Alex. What a series this was. Absolutely incredibly competitive series all the way through to Game 7. Do just want to say I did predict Rays in 7, so, just saying. But
not exactly the way you thought it would happen, Steve, though.
Definitely not. You got that right. So every single one of these games was decided by 3 or fewer runs. It actually was, again, extremely competitive between the Astros and the Rays. And really, definitely, as you said, we didn't really expect it to go the way it did because Tampa took the first 3 games with a team up 3-0. And then, you assume, okay, they're going to sweep. But, of course, that didn't happen. And Houston actually managed to push them back all the way to Game 7, which has only happened one other time in history, much to the chagrin of Alex and I. But Tampa managed to actually hold off Houston and their ticket to the World Series.
I mean, Steve, based off the standings, you would think that this would have been an easy sweep for the Rays. Maybe Houston could have pushed them to 5, with Houston finishing under 500 and everything. The Rays being the top team in the American League. But, Houston, I think, is a much better team than their record suggests. I know, we could talk at length about how much the cheating affected them, but this is still a really solid team, even when they're playing with no hidden advantages. Probably just a bad 60-game stretch they had while they were so far down. And I thought, the two teams really played each other very evenly.
Definitely agree with that. So, just going back and forth with each other. And I think one of the very underrated areas that a lot of us didn't really see coming for the Astros was actually their pitching.
Yes.
One of the biggest thing for them was getting really great starts from guys like FWD, who pitched very well, although he did take the loss. He did pitch very well. And Framber Valdez, I don't know anyone saw that one coming. That was a very big surprise right there. It just shows you there was a surprising amount of depth behind Zach Greinke.
I think Framber Valdez was really the MVP of Houston's postseason from the pitching side. Really every series he's showed up and he delivered for them. And he was excellent in this American League Championship.
He was basically doing his Verlander impersonation, with Verlander having to miss basically the entire season and probably all of 2021 as well. He should be a good piece for them moving forward, if he continues doing what he did in the ALCS.
And we talked about this when we did our preview for this series, that the familiar faces were showing up for Houston on the offense. But we didn't have that strong pitching like we had in the past. You mentioned Ray Verlander out for the entire year. They lost Garrett Cole. They had an older Zach Greinke who wasn't all that effective coming into this series. And so that offense that we known from Houston was certainly there and showing up, especially against Oakland. But the pitching is what surprised us the most. But they really just couldn't, even with all their exciting comebacks and their great dramatic play, they couldn't overcome the depth of the Rays, Steve.
Absolutely. Now, Rays showed off exactly what they had to show off, and that was all the pitching they had, starting and bullpen. So let me first get out of the way. Charlie Morton, you don't want to start anybody else in a Game 7. This guy shuts down whoever he faces, and he gave up 0 runs the entire series. Without a doubt, if it weren't for the fact that Arozarena was spectacular on offense, really, Morton is a big reason that the Rays are where they are. He really just gave it his all and really showed everyone what he's made of. On top of Morton, you really had a whole host of relievers, and it goes well beyond who they were banking on. Nick Anderson was their closer all season and gave up, I believe, only one run the entire season. He was absolutely spectacular. However, in this series alone, he gave up 4 runs. So it was really up to the rest of all the relievers, whether it was John Curtis, Aaron Loop, Pete Fairbanks, these guys that could throw 100 miles an hour, who really, they were very underrated threats. And yeah, they really showed Houston what they had in store, and it paid off big time.
That stable of guys that Kevin Cash talked about really showed up and have showed up this whole postseason. We saw it against the Yankees, saw it against the Astros. Diego Castillo, another guy that just has tremendous stuff that we've seen really shine this postseason. And what do you think about the depth of the Rays and how they were able to overcome the near comeback of the Astros?
The Rays pitching, I wouldn't want to face them, day of the week, but especially not in the playoffs. I think the Rays' depth really helped them out, being that they had to play 7 games in 7 days. Now, Houston, they don't have as deep bullpen. They got some intriguing names, and they all pitched pretty well. But the Rays, the fact that they have 6, 7 guys you can throw out there, you don't have to lean on 1 or 2 guys. We saw that, especially with the Yankees in that series, that you can tell that Boone only trusted maybe 3 guys, Green, Chapman, and Britton. Have Cash with his, stable of guys out there, 6, 7 guys deep. It's really what helped them, weather the storm of the Astros.
I think that 7 games in 7 days are going to be tough for anyone. And when you trust literally every arm on your roster, you're at an immediate advantage. Dusty, he managed the way he could manage with the arms that he had. He trusted Valdez, trusted Greinke. He trusted some of the guys out of the bullpen, but like you said, Ray, they weren't really the established names. A lot of good arms, and some of them got really big outs for the Astros when they needed it. At the end of the day, it was the depth of the Rays that really prevailed. Now, I want to talk about something pretty interesting. Steve, you mentioned at the start of this that it's only the second time in the history of baseball that a team down 3-0 went to a Game 7. Obviously, the 0-4 Red Sox won that Game 7, coming all the way back against the Yankees. And this 2020 Houston team lost that Game 7, but still forced it. Only the 4th time in the history of baseball that a team down 3-0 even forced a Game 6, the other being the 98 Braves and the 99 Mets. So just amazing to see the fight of this Astros team that had been so vilified all season. It felt like everybody in the world was against this Houston team. Even people that hated the attitude of the young Rays, didn't like the analytically driven team that Tampa Bay was. Nobody I knew outside of Texas was rooting for the Astros. So it really made for a drama-filled series to see them come all the way back.
Absolutely. No, you really got to commend the resiliency of the Astros. They never said die. It was extremely impressive effort on their behalf, especially when you look at the regular season results from the Astros. For example, Jose Altuve, he, in the regular season, only hit to the tune of a 629 OPS. Now, obviously, you see a lot of people on Twitter going crazy and be like, oh, that's what happens when you don't wear a buzzer and all these other things. But Altuve is an accomplished hitter. We've known that for his entire career. He really has just been always a guy that can get a hit and then learn, of course, to get on base and hit for some pop. And he turned it on. He actually had an OPS of 1.447, 3 home runs, 5 ribbies in the series, got on base with a clip of 563. He had a fantastic series. Really, shut the haters up in terms of his offensive potential. And you got to give it to a lot of the rest of the Astros offense as well. Really put in serious work. Michael Brantley, one of my favorite players, really, because I love his contact-oriented approach, hit for a 913 OPS throughout the series. He really had a couple of big hits here and there. And Correa, who has a flair for the dramatic, 2 big home runs in the series. He really did a spectacular job as well. This Astros offense is seriously impressive. It's just that they could not, of course, keep up with the Rays pitching. And as we all know, pitching does beat offense.
I think that the big bats for Houston were really the only ones that were able to handle Tampa's pitching and their pitching depth. that the guys like the Reddicks and the Gurriels, the ones that they're good players, but they're not stars. Like they were beaten down by the Rays coming all different arm angles, 98 miles an hour. Like they struggled, but Altuve, Correa, those guys, they're the face of the team for a reason.
And
They're no buzzer.
Bregman hurt them this series. He with a lot of big opportunities, even in that Game 7, came up late in the game with men on after Correa had gotten the 2 RBIs to make it a 4-2 game. And he didn't really come through this series. He hit 143. Not the series for Alex Bregman, who playing through injuries this whole season, but he needed to come through offensively, and he did in that series.
Bregman just really did not have his stuff, really. He had 4 hits all series, and all of which were singles. Walked a single time, no runs, no ribbies. And for our analytically minded listeners, his win probability added was a negative 0.81. Very, very poor series on Bregman's behalf.
Not what you want. And I do want to point out something that was an important narrative early in the series. Steve, you mentioned Altuve's offense, but his defense was killing the Astros early in the series. A few throwing errors. He had the error in the game that led to Margot's 3-run home run, and he had the error in Game 3, which led to a big inning for the Rays in their win there. He really came up with the Steve Sachs, Chuck Knobloch yips in this series. He forgot how to throw, or something was wrong with his arm. Didn't have the ability to throw for a few games there, and it really cost his team. So as much as he helped them on the offensive side, big home runs, some big hits, he really hurt them on the defensive side. But all this talk of the Astros, of course, is not to discredit the Rays offense, which is really one person, Randy Arozarena. He's just great. The Cuban Mookie Betts. He's real.
He's living up to it. He really is living up to that moniker. Although I want to also give credit to Ji-Man Choi, who also had a spectacular series himself. Granted, didn't play every game, but also got some big hits. But that's really most of the offense between them. Manuel Margot had a very solid OPS, not a lot of hits, but 3 home runs, as well as
and an amazing catch.
Yes, unbelievable catch. I don't know many players that could have made the catch he made. He was spectacular. The Rays defense in general, as per usual, just was spectacular. You really got to give them credit. They're phenomenal offense, great pitching, and then you just get those couple of guys that could just do damage. And got to give major applause to Arozarena. He's something special.
There's a lot of fallout from this series. Obviously, we know that the Rays are still playing, so their ultimate fate and how we view them this season will be determined by how they play in the World Series. But there's a lot of fallout on the Astros side of things. George Springer's a free agent. The Astros are recovering from this cheating scandal that, they played under 500, and yet here they were in the ALCS. Dusty Baker managed them this year. Dusty Baker going to stay as manager this year. So a lot of fallout for this Astros team that, we really don't know what direction they're going to go as of now.
Toward the future for the Astros. Now, we have to see whether or not, this new playoff system stays or not. But I still think they're going to be a contender. Yeah, Oakland is a big rival, big competition for them right there. But other than that, the rest of the division's pretty weak. If the Angels can ever put together a pitching staff, they'd be a threat. And the American League, 2021, it's still pretty segmented. You still have your contenders, and you have your bottom feeders. You did see some improvement with the Baltimores, the Detroits, but you still got another maybe 2 or 3 years until you have more of the National League has, where you're 12 teams deep that can contend for a playoff spot. So I'd look for Houston to come back next year. He's looking for a wild card.
I think that's a very fair view. I think the Astros still have a lot of their pieces. As you said, Springer is a free agent. Michael Brantley is also a free agent as well, so that is another big loss for them. But they still have a lot of pretty young guys. Bregman and Correa are still extremely young. And they still, as we've seen, now have actually the makings of a very good rotation. This team is going to be good yet again. So I think we could definitely expect to see them competing once again for a wild card. I'm not sure if they're going to continue to have that same baggage that they've had, but we're definitely going to see what happens, especially if fans are back in the stadium. We're going to see how all of us feel about Houston, what they did. So going to be very interesting to see that.
I think they may actually have the same baggage for exactly what you said at the end there, Steve. We haven't seen them with fans yet. So when they have fans, hopefully next season, we'll see how they're treated by every fan base across the league, especially when you have guys like Correa that made the team almost more of a villain, starting with their win over Minnesota and continuing throughout these playoffs.
Yes, Correa was definitely not afraid to speak to all the reporters, and seeing all those clips get shared on social media. He made himself out. They kind of owned that villain title. It really was very interesting to see there. So I think the Astros are going to probably have to get used to it. They don't really have to worry about anything, of course, from the other teams at this point. But with fans in attendance, hopefully early next year, we're going to see.
Interesting to see. And of course, Dusty Baker still missing that World Series title as a manager. Been with a lot of good teams. He's been to the playoffs a lot of times. This perhaps is one of his more impressive runs, taking a team under 500 to Game 7 of the American League Championship Series against the team with the best record in the league. He still doesn't have it. We'll see if he, when he gets one more go with his 2021 Astros team, and that could be the end for Dusty. So we'll see if Dusty has another run in him for this year. But I was impressed, and I've been critical of Dusty in the past, but I was impressed by how he got these players play and get all the way to a Game 7.
Absolutely. I have to agree big time. Dusty's managing was excellent throughout the entire postseason. Of course, credit to Kevin Cash as well for his managing of the Rays. The managing was just great. Credit where credit is due. They've all done really great jobs.
I'll make one more point on Dusty. Dusty's not really the most analytically inclined manager you're going to find out there, but the one thing he does extremely well, and it's really the reason why the Astros hired him in the first place, he can manage a clubhouse. When the Astros are down 3-0, he is probably one of the guys you're going to want there to keep the team focused, going in the right direction. And they were able to force Game 7. They were, one swing away. If Correa hits a grand slam in the 8th inning instead of a 2-run single, game's tied. You could easily go on to the World Series.
Absolutely. I mean, great respect for Dusty and what he did with his Astros team. But of course, Kevin Cash, he pushed all the right buttons. He has the players. He knows how to use them. And congratulations to the Tampa Bay Rays, a well-deserved American League pennant, the second in franchise history, first since 2008. When they played the Philadelphia Phillies in the World Series. This year, they'll be taking on a different opponent, though, and we'll get back into that National League Championship Series right after this. Okay, we're back, and we're going to get started talking about the National League Championship Series that saw the Major League best Los Angeles Dodgers against the National League East champion Atlanta Braves. And Ray, why don't you get us started with that series?
The Dodgers were able to do what the Astros weren't, and I'm sure that is a lot of solace to Dodger fans all over the globe. Come back and win the series, being down 3-1. Atlanta fans, at least it's better than 28-3. That's all I can say. But halfway through Game 2, I was thinking, I'm a little surprised about how well Atlanta's been playing. Like, I know this is a great team. They're definitely the second best team in the National League, but their pitching was, especially after shutting out the Reds, shutting out the Marlins 2 out of 3 games, only one run against the potent Dodgers lineup in Game 1. I'm like, hey, maybe Atlanta's pitching's for real. They're going to make this an easy series. Well, Dodgers start coming back in Game 2. With the 7 runs in the last 3 innings. Actually, only a home run away from actually completing the comeback and winning Game 2. But then Game 3, basically, he couldn't even turn on the TV, and it was already 6-0. Dodgers scoring 11 runs
That's
in
a
the
new
first
record.
inning alone. 11 runs.
Yes, Atlanta is very good at setting records for runs given up in the postseason.
Yes. And, Dodgers with their dominating Game 3, but Atlanta coming right back in Game 4 saying, okay, maybe that was just just a blip in Atlanta's pitching. They probably got this. But credit to the Dodgers. They stepped up. They held Atlanta's offense, and Atlanta actually has pretty much an equal offense to the Dodgers. I think the Dodgers only scored one more run than the Braves did the entire year, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
So it's basically, Dodgers and Dodgers B pretty much with the Braves. But I don't know. Game 5, Will Smith homering off his namesake, and Game 6, that amazing performance by Bueller, and then finally Game 7, Bellinger completing the comeback with one of the hardest hit balls I've seen all season.
Great comeback from the Dodgers, no doubt, and they showed their playoff pedigree and just the quality up and down the team, both offensively in some of those record-setting outputs, as well as near comebacks and full comebacks that the team made. And they showed when they needed to show it that they could pitch. It looked a little iffy. Game 1, tight pants Bueller didn't look all that great. He loosened the pants and was excellent later in the series. We had Kershaw having his issues, maybe being left in too long. We can talk about playoff Kershaw a little bit later. And the Braves, like you said, Ray, they're an offensive team. And so the fact that they were able to score these runs wasn't surprising, but that pitching early in the series was excellent. The 7 games in 7 days, though, they go to those same wells. They have a great bullpen, but you go to that well enough times, and you're going to start to cave. And I think finally the Dodgers, being the veterans that they are, were able to read those pitchers and obviously come back and win the series.
Well, we saw it in, even in the regular season too. Atlanta's Achilles heel was their starting pitching depth. They had Fried, who was amazing the entire year, but after Soroka went down, didn't really have a ton. I mean, Ian Anderson, stepped up. He's had an amazing rookie year and amazing playoffs. But then even behind him, I mean, nobody really stepped up that well. Wilson had a good game though. I'll give him that. Bryce Wilson, especially Game 3, Kyle Wright. Oh God, I'm pretty sure a couple of our listeners could have put up a similar line.
Yeah, Kyle Wright did not look very good in Game 3. He actually had a very good performance earlier in the postseason, and Kyle Wright has been known as one of the Braves' best prospects for years now. I believe he's very highly drafted. He's like their future ace is basically how he's been described, and he looked great before, but sometimes when the pressure is on, maybe he was just feeling it a little too much. Wasn't able to even give Atlanta an inning before giving up 7 runs. So definitely a tough, very, very, very tough loss right there. Probably a big reason why he didn't pitch again in the series. But with the Braves, they did have a lot more pitching than we give them credit for. Not necessarily in the rotation, because again, it really was mostly Fried and Anderson. Both of them started 2 games, and Bryce Wilson did have a very good game. 6 innings of 1 hit. Granted, it was a home run, but that's all he gave up. Really excellent job, especially for a guy that's really not a very noteworthy pitcher, but who knows, maybe that will change next year. You got to look at Atlanta's bullpen and see that they did a really, really great job at run prevention. Tyler Matzik, Chris Martin, Shane Green, each of them only gave up a single run each. They were able to go they had a number of appearances. Martin had 5 appearances, Matzik and Green had 4 appearances each. These were guys that Snitker was able to go to and say, you got to pitch and you got to make sure you don't give up anything, and they did not. So very, very good job for them.
Unfortunately for the Braves, though, they had those guys, the Martins and the Melancons that pitched very well. But then you had guys, Grant Dayton, Darren O'Day, Will Smith. They all just imploded on themselves pretty much every single time they got the ball. They all had ERAs that are, that's the best word that can describe them.
Yeah, no, Snitker didn't get all the performances out of some of those relievers that he needed, despite that depth. Interesting. Talk about Wilson's excellent performance starting in the series. This was his first professional start, his first start since his college days. So really, what a time to get your first start in professional baseball.
Absolutely. I think we also got to look at the Dodgers and also look at, of course, their amazing pitching that was on full display. So you, of course, as you mentioned, Tight Pants Bueller, he fixed that up. He pitched a gem. Julio Urias, I feel like, is not getting enough credit here. He did start a game, and then he managed to go a few innings of relief in Game 7 when they really needed him.
Big clutch innings for him.
So he really just did a great job right there. Kershaw, I mean, look, I think we got to talk about it just because he is Clayton Kershaw. So Kershaw started, I believe it was Game 4, and he went 5 innings at first and managed to only give up 1 run, which was fairly Kershaw-like in a way, in that he did not give up a lot of runs. Normally, Kershaw goes deeper. But it was in that 6th inning where he pitched to 3 guys, and if memory serves, just 2 were not great hits and could have gone the other way before he gave up a big hit to Marcell Ozuna. And it's just rough that after those 3 guys, he was taken out of the game. Ozuna went on to score, so he got tagged with all those runs without completing the 6th inning. You know, you got to look at Kershaw's his whole body of work in the postseason, and his postseason is now, it's a very large resume at this point. He has basically a full season slate of innings. He pitched 177 innings in October. Extremely impressive that he's pitched that much, but at the same time, his ERA is also a nearly 2 whole runs higher. Obviously, Kershaw's an elite regular season pitcher. We know that. But you got to look at this and say, I think I see why Roberts did not put him in Game 7.
Well, I have a few things I would like to say about playoff Kershaw. Obviously, Roberts using Kershaw, he was sort of forced to put him in Game 4 because his back acted up, couldn't pitch him in Game 2. Makes you wonder whether you use him in Game 7 just because you're not playing for the next day, but still, are you going to have the most effective Clayton Kershaw after he pitched in Game 4? Playoff Kershaw, there are problems there that I think are overblown at times, but obviously he is not nearly the pitcher that he's been in the regular season. Like you said, Steve, we now have a pretty large sample size to say that definitively he's not the same pitcher. Something that I think is very interesting, though, is the way he's been managed, a lot by Roberts, but also when Mattingly was there, is that he's allowed to face the team the 3rd time through the order a lot more than most playoff pitchers. I get it. Clayton Kershaw, one of the greatest left-hander pitchers we've ever seen, but still makes you wonder in a postseason series, you're gonna put him in for that long. And he did that again this time, 3rd time through the order. If you had pulled him after 5, is that the best move for the Dodgers? Maybe at that point, that's the best move for the Dodgers. Something else that's really interesting about playoff Kershaw is that since going back all the way to 2008, the National League Championship Series against the Phillies, Kershaw has left the game with 23 runners on base.
Wow.
16 of those runners have been allowed to score. That's 70% of the runners that he leaves on base when he's taken out by his manager are allowed to score.
We saw the stat similar to that too.
Right.
Since 2015, I believe it was 15 of the 16 runners have been allowed to score.
Wow.
It's unbelievable.
That's almost like the Twins losing 18 straight playoff games. Like that's how unbelievable it is.
It's funny because if you take out half of those runners and they score at league average pace for inherited runners scoring, his ERA drops. Still not Clayton Kershaw level, but we're talking about around the high 3s. Now, not great for Clayton Kershaw, no, but significantly better. And we know a number of Hall of Fame caliber pitchers that have not great postseason ERAs, certainly when you're comparing it to their regular season numbers. Maddox and Clemens and Randy Johnson, if the inherited runners are scoring at league average pace rather than this ridiculous number, 70% for his career, and as Ray said, all but 1 since 2015, he's looking a little bit better. So I'm not saying Kershaw is not to blame for their Game 4 loss, but I think his managers have to maybe manage him a little bit differently as playoff Kershaw rather than regular season Kershaw.
Or his relievers just have to get a guy out.
Well,
That is definitely a fair point there.
Certainly. I mean, the Dodgers bullpen is not a bad bullpen. And
No.
so it's amazing just how they've been for him, especially in the last 5 years.
Absolutely. But to pivot over to the offensive side of things, just looking first at the Dodgers, of the offensive display that Corey Seager put on this series, holy moly. 5 homers, 11 runs batted in, a 1.23 OPS. He just destroyed the ball. He was vital to the Dodgers' success here. So very good time to really turn it on. He had a great season. He had a 943 OPS in the regular season. So Corey was definitely back to his old ways, definitely feeling strong, but he turned it on up another level. Another player I really do love to highlight is Kike Hernandez. This guy just kind of just pops in and somehow hits a big home run. He just comes in, he does his damage just seemingly out of nowhere. Kike is not a super amazing player. He's mostly either a role player or a defensive replacement late in the game. But he has that knack. He's that clutch gene in him. So big time, big time bat right there that you can rely on.
A lot of great pieces for the Dodgers, and some of the people that have struggled this year came up when they needed to the most. Ray talked about Bellinger with that massive home run to win Game 7. Just a wonderful sight to see if you're a Dodgers fan, and really impressive to see from the former MVP. I also want to give a shout out to Mookie Betts. He wasn't the offensive player that we expected Mookie Betts, but boy, was Mookie out there defensively. And you're watching this day in and day out and see Bellinger in center and Betts in right field, and the defense of the Dodgers is very impressive in this series. And just even though he wasn't maybe the $300 million player offensively, he showed that he was defensive in the series.
Absolutely.
It's hard to, remember that he's a converted second baseman too, Mookie Betts.
Right.
That is true. Unbelievable defense. You really would never expect it. But a lot of players, you would think, never really getting into their quote-unquote natural position. I mean, Andrelton Simmons was a pitcher for crying out loud and ends up being like one of the greatest defensive shortstops you've ever seen. So maybe there's something to it. Who knows?
Yeah, Juan Lagares was a shortstop. Then he became a center fielder until his injuries.
Yep,
likewise.
Absolutely true.
I'd be impressed by the athleticism on display from the Dodgers. And, on a sad note, going out for the Braves, because they obviously have a lot of great young pieces, both in the rotation and obviously in their lineup. It's tough when you have an MVP candidate, lifetime Brave, and Freddie Freeman almost get right there and just have it snatched away from him. And he played, he played well in this series, had some big hits for them. But tough for Freddie Freeman, but all the props to the Dodgers for the way they came back and played. And once again, Dave Roberts has taken this team to a National League pennant.
Now, interesting fun fact. This is the first ever playoff series that Pablo Sandoval has lost.
Really?
Wow.
Yes. His only other playoff series were the 2010, 12, and 14 Giants. So this would have been, if you include the wild card games, this would have been 12 straight, 12 out of 13 now.
Man, you would think Panda would have been that big good luck charm, but I guess the Dodgers were just that good.
Yeah, well, maybe. I mean, Panda's not exactly what he was back in 2012, but
that's true.
He did get hit by a pitch.
He got on base. That's something.
He contributed.
He made his appearance in the series, but wasn't enough to take down his old California rivals, who came in and they did what they were supposed to do. Best team in the National League won the pennant. Best team in the American League won their pennant. First time since the 2013 World Series that we have the teams with the two best record in their leagues facing off against each other. It's going to be a great World Series. When we come back, we're going to talk about our predictions for the World Series, and we'll preview the clash between the Rays and the Dodgers. We are back, and as we get ready to preview and give you our predictions for the 116th World Series, I have a trivia question for you boys to see if you can get it before we talk about this series. Globe Life Field new ballpark in Arlington, will host every game of this World Series. Do you know what the last World Series was that was played all in one ballpark?
Yes,
Ray, what is it?
1944.
Very well done. It's played at Sportsman Park. The St. Louis teams playing each other, the only pennant for the St. Louis Browns. We also had this in 1921 and 1922, where the Yankees and the Giants played each other. I should have known Ray would have gotten it right away. Ray, our resident trivia expert, so he beat you this
Baseball
time, Steve.
historian.
Beat you
Yep.
this time, Steve.
That's fine by me. I was going to guess the Polo Grounds.
That was a good guess. You know, it did happen there, but there was a more recent one, the only pennant won by the St. Louis Browns. But let's talk about the games that will be played at that host site, Globe Life Field in Arlington, with the Dodgers taking on the Rays in what should be a very exciting series.
So the Rays and the Dodgers are both obviously extremely formidable teams, as we've said multiple times, the best in their leagues. So when you look at them together, rather than go offensive, pitching, defensive, all that stuff that we did last time, I think we could just look at them really, maybe a couple of specific players, where the Rays have, I think, an advantage over the Dodgers in pitching depth. So there's a lot more guys that, as we've seen, Kevin Cash can turn to really get those big outs when he needs to. That's going to bode very well. Now, this World Series does have off days again, which is very good for both teams, of course. Though for the Rays, I think that pitching depth is still going to serve them extremely well over the Dodgers. I think that's a pretty clear advantage they have.
I think that the extra off days benefit the Rays more than the Dodgers do, mostly because the Rays really only have 4 starting pitchers, or in case of Yarborough, 4 length guys. They have Snell and Glasnow, which are 2 of the most underrated pitchers in the game. You have the aforementioned Ryan Yarborough, and then you have Charlie Morton. The Dodgers, they're 5 deep. They've got Gonsolin, they've got Kershaw, Arias, Fuller, and May. So the fact that the Rays can only need to rely on 4 starters and they don't need a bullpen game like they did in Game 5 of the ALCS, I think that'll help them to their advantage.
It's a really good point. I think, the off days would probably favor the Rays. Although, when you do look at the Dodgers, as we've seen, obviously we talked about Kershaw and his struggles, we're not sure if I'm not sure personally if I would want to see Kershaw more than once again. So, although Kershaw is lined up to be the Game 1 starter, it just makes the most sense. He's on regular rest, which is fantastic. You really can't ask for much better than having one of the greatest pitchers of all time be lined up to be your Game 1 starting pitcher in the World Series, even despite all of his struggles. So,
I think that, similar to what I said with the Rays entering the ALCS, how Cash managed against the Yankees, don't manage for the next day. But if it winds up like that, then you're better off for it. And I think that we have the same thing now. He's set up to have Snell and Glasnow, Game 1 and 2, where he could have burned through all of his arms at the end of that series, and he didn't. And I think that the Rays, like Ray said, are set up really nicely with the off days, with a normal World Series schedule, because they can use Snell, Glasnow, and Morton. And, of course, they'll use Yarborough either as a starter or as a bulk guy. But I think that they're set up really nicely against this Dodgers team, and they got to keep up what they've been doing. Dodgers offense is better than any offense they've seen so far, and that includes the Yankees offense, that includes the Houston offense. The Dodgers offense is a different beast. And so they'll be set up properly. They may have the stable of guys that we know have delivered on this stage, but this is a new monster that they see in the Dodgers offense.
That they do, and I think the Dodgers have one very, as you just said, that's their clearest advantage, is that offense. There's a lot of guys that, on the Dodgers that are very capable of delivering the big hit. Conversely, on the Rays, now there is the Cuban Mookie Betts there, but aside from Arozarena, you don't have that big bat, really. Again, we've seen some pretty good performances from guys like Ji-Man Choi, but I don't know if you feel comfortable rolling dice on him when the Dodgers basically just have to walk Arozarena. That's all they really have to do.
Yeah, Loud needs to step up. I know he hit the big home run in the end of the series there, but Arozarena doesn't need to be pitched to. It doesn't make any sense why he was pitched to throughout the Yankee series, throughout the Houston series. The guy eats fastballs for breakfast. He's killing the fastball. And everyone around him, even with good performances from Choi, even with some big hits from other people in the lineup when they needed it, they're not hitting like Randy Arozarena.
No,
Which
they
is
are not.
crazy to hear. If you said that 3 months ago, nobody would have understood what that meant.
How true that is. Some guys just come alive in October, and Arozarena has been that guy.
Really, Randy Arozarena has been just a star. Came out of seemingly nowhere. Kevin Cash said he wasn't going to make the team out of the first spring training. Obviously did out of spring training 2.0 and has become, like I've been saying, the Cuba Mookie Betts, and it's exciting to see. But other guys definitely have to step up if they want to beat the Dodgers. Because the Dodgers pitching, while it's been spotty at times, is 5 deep, like Ray said. They've got great live arms. They really do have some amazing talent up and down that rotation. But I think the key for them is the man we talked about earlier, Clayton Kershaw. You know, he's pitching game 1. What does it say to the Dodgers, taking our numbers inclined approach out of it for a second? If your ace comes after struggling in game 4 of the National League Championship Series, for whatever reason he struggled, and he lays a stinker in game 1 against the Rays. That's not what the Dodgers need. Dodgers need Kershaw to set a trend if they want to win. I think he's the key to this series. He gets 2 starts in the series.
If Kershaw comes out as regular season Kershaw, Dodgers should have this in the bag. But if playoff Kershaw rears his ugly head, that may make things a lot more interesting.
I think Kershaw and Buehler are better than Glasnow and Snell and Morton. And those two, if they pitch like they can pitch, that's it for the Dodgers. And you want, like you said, regular season Kershaw, and you want loose pants Buehler to win this series for the Dodgers.
Sure, I definitely think, loose pants Buehler would definitely be a big asset for the Dodgers in this series. I do think one pretty weak point, actually, for the Dodgers is Tony Gonsolin. Now, he had a really truly spectacular regular season, ERA of 2.31 over 46 innings, so, as much of the regular season as it is this time around. But in the postseason, he's just been lit up every single time. So maybe that rookie shine is starting to wear off on him. I'm not sure you can really go to him and trust him to get those big outs. I see him right now as more of a liability. I could roll the dice on Kershaw just fine. He's Clayton freaking Kershaw. But Gonsolin, I don't know. And that's a big hole right there.
How much stock, and it's tough to say because the Rays have been world beaters. Not that they weren't the better team in all these series, but they beat the Yankees, who is seen as this titan that they had to overcome to be considered a legitimate team. Then they beat the Astros, the team that have been to 4 consecutive American League Championship Series and have won 2 pennants in 17 and 19. And so they beat those teams as well. So how much stock do you put into the fact that the Rays are all new to this? Only Charlie Morton, I believe, is the only player that's been in a World Series on the Rays. Correct me if I'm wrong with that. Meanwhile, the Dodgers, up and down that team, whether they were there with the Dodgers or there with another team, they're World Series experienced. How much stock we put into that?
That they are, but the Dodgers have been here a couple times. This is the 3rd time in 4 years that the Dodgers are in the World Series. So, and, obviously they did have a very good showing against Boston. They did. It was not an amazing series, but they definitely put it up. So I'm not sure how much experience really matters here. Sometimes you want that unproven, hungry team that just goes for it. They don't know what they're doing, but they just kind of go for it, and sometimes they go all the way. I don't think that's a big deal here. I think the biggest deal really is just about finding those holes that the Dodgers in the Rays lineup, finding the holes in the Rays lineup that the Dodgers can exploit. And I think they're way better positioned to exploit those holes and really take advantage of the series. If we're okay with doing predictions right now, I think this one is definitely the Dodgers to lose. I mean, again, what a shock, you know. We're going to pick the best team that we've seen in a while to win the whole thing. But I think the Dodgers can get this done probably in 5 games, especially if Kershaw just proves everybody wrong and says, I am Clayton freaking Kershaw. I will beat you.
So Steve has the Dodgers in 5 games. Bold. Ray, what are you thinking?
I've got the Dodgers in 6. Now, I think with the pitching matchups, I think Snell can easily win you a game. I think Glasnow can easily win you a game. A lot of it depends on, again, the X factor in the series, Clayton Kershaw. If regular season Kershaw shows up, I'm not sure if either Glasnow or Snell, I think it's Snell who's going to be matching up with Kershaw, can beat him. But, it's a wild card. If Kershaw does not pitch to regular season Kershaw standards, Snell wins both those starts, and Glasnow wins a start. You go into Game 7, Charlie Morton's on the hill. So, as we said before, Clayton Kershaw is the X factor, but if he can at least pitch decently, Dodgers in 6.
I think that this series should forever be known as the Andrew Friedman series, that we're going to have an intense series by 2 great teams, 2 genius managers that are 2 of the deepest squads we've seen in the last few years. You don't get the 2 best teams in baseball for no reason. I think it's going to be a great series. Before the postseason, predicted the Dodgers to win the World Series. I think I did. Right, Steve? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, you did. You had Dodgers over Rays, actually. So you had this matchup.
I had this matchup. I had Dodgers over Rays. But I believe in the Game 7 strategy, ground Chuck on the mound. I'm going with Rays in 7. I think we see big performances from Kershaw. I think he's going to step up and pitch well. I think Mookie Betts is going to be outstanding against a team he's faced so many times in his career. But I think the depth of the Rays and the feistiness of the Rays is going to come through. I think Arozarena continues, maybe not quite as hot, but he's going to continue his excellent hitting. And I think these other guys are going to come to life. Starting with Brandon Lau, I think you're going to see the stable full of guys come in and be able to shut down the Dodgers offense. So I'm going to be contrarian to you boys and say the Tampa Bay Rays are going to win the World Series in 7 games.
All right. Well, we got you recorded on that, Alex. So
I'm on the record.
It's going to be
and
very...
that would be the most 2020 thing ever.
That it would. Well,
it definitely would. But let's say, for all that 2020 has presented us in the real world, in the sports world, this postseason has been outstanding. And the American League and National League Championship Series just rose to the next level with how great they could be. So I think this World Series is going to be the topping on the cake. I think we're going 7 games. I think we're in for a great matchup between these 2 teams with the best record in both leagues. So you have our predictions. Steve's got the Dodgers in 5. Ray's got the Dodgers in 6. I'm going with the Rays in 7 games for their first World Series championship. The Dodgers are stuck in 88. They're not getting out of there. You've heard our predictions for this 2020 World Series. Hope to hear yours. We're in for an exciting one. Absolutely. This has been episode 2 of the FWD Baseball Podcast.